Hi guys, I'm Darren, and in this episode of Flight Controller Therapy, I'm going to be setting up a new model on my transmitter for iNav. I'm going to go through the switch choices that I'm using personally and how to set it up to put it through to the modes in iNav software itself. So let's dive straight in and get on with it. So before we get into the video, I just want to thank everyone. I've just got over 400 subscribers and it means a lot to me. So thank you very much, guys. If you haven't subscribed already, I'd appreciate it if you did. And if you find the video useful, thumbs up would be great as well. So let's get straight into it. This is probably going to be a fairly long video, I'm not going to lie. But I will, like always, put chapters in the bottom so you can skip forward to the parts that interest you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head over to the desk so it'll be easier to see things on the transmitter. So let's shoot over. Right, so I thought I'd start by going over how I used to have my transmitter set up. So there we go. So this is my X9D, which I've been using for quite a while now. You may notice that unlike most X9Ds, this actually has a 6-position switch here. And this blue switch up here is actually SA that usually goes in here. So this is a nice simple mod that lets you have a 6-position switch. So what I have on this is my flight modes. So nice and easy. I have auto launch in the middle. I have home position reset on the bottom. So most of the time when I'm flying, that is in the up position. This one here switches on LEDs. I have auto trim and auto tune on the top shoulder, and I have arming at the back. So what I found, I actually had an instance where I needed return to home. So I'm actually going to change how I do this, because when you have an emergency situation and a brain fart, trying to find return to home using this dial isn't brilliant. So I'm going to change that. And what I'm also going to try and do is combine a lot of these, actually this one and this one, onto a single channel, because there's not really much point in using home position reset, launch mode and tuning at the same time. It's not really going to happen. So I'm going to combine these switches to free up another radio channel. So what I plan on doing is having this big switch here. So in the middle position is regular flight, pushed away is return to home, and towards me is manual. Actually, I might do that on the smaller switch because you've got less chance of knocking it than the bigger switch. The middle 6-position switch is going to be other flight modes, so acro, cruise, waypoints, whatever I choose to put on there will be on this 6-way switch. This here is going to be used to control the OSDs. Now we could actually do it as steps, but there's not really much point because we can just do that in iNav. And I'm also going to implement something that I put in one of the more recent videos, where the last position is actually a tuning OSD, and these two trims will change the tune once you enter that OSD. So you can use this trim switch here to choose what you want to adjust, and then this one to adjust the actual values themselves. I'm going to leave auto trim and auto tune up here, and I'm going to put again my LEDs and a beeper on this one, and this switch here will be off, auto launch, and then bottom for home position reset. This is going to still be my arm switch, and the momentary switch we're going to use for a multi-function. If you've used the iNav Fixed-Wing Group transmitter model, you'll have an idea of how this works, but it will be a bit more enhanced. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new model. So this process that I'm going through now, I'm going to do it on the radio. It will be basically identical on things like a Radio Master TX16S, on a Jumper T16, and one of the variants T18, and it will be very similar on other OpenTX systems. There are some things like this page you don't have this on the older OpenTX transmitters, which I actually really like this. I like that I can categorize things. What we're going to do is create a model, and like every time with iNav, we just want to make a standard plane. So it has a motor, it's on channel 3, it has, that's because I set up my extra, so we want one aileron with a Y cable, we don't want flaps, and we want A channel 2, so that's elevator, and we want B channel 4 rudder. So that will give us our AETR channel order. Yeah, sorry, we're in it now. So hold down the model menu button, and what we're going to do, I'm going to give this a name of iNav. Right, so you see I've called it iNav R9. The way I set mine up is any plane, wing, whatever that's using iNav and has an R9 receiver, I bind to this model. So I don't have individual models for each aircraft. I just have individual transmitter modules for different receiver types, because everything on it is the same. There's no need to duplicate models. You can change everything on iNav itself, so there's no need to have any different settings in the transmitter. It's not like traditional models where you'll have different trim settings or different expos. I mean, you may have different expos, but you can set the expo in iNav. You can set rates in iNav, so you don't actually need to do anything here to have any differences. You can just set up a standard model, then you're guaranteed that all your switches are in the same position because it's using the same transmitter model. So what I'll do is I'll create this, and then I'll duplicate it for my other transmitter type or radio or receiver types. Like I'll have a Crossfire, I'll have an L9R. So anyway, I've just given it a name, and then what we want to do is, sorry, I'm still getting used to this scroll wheel. We need to set up our receivers at some point. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set this up, even though I've called it R9, I'm going to set it up on my iNav demo board just to get it working on this video. So that is going to be a D16. What we need to do, we just set it up D16. I'm going to leave it on 16 channel. If we use less, we can always knock it down if we use less than 9. At the moment, I'm not going to bind it because it won't bind. And I'm going to set the failsafe to no pulses. Because that's, if you're using free sky stuff, you set it to no pulses. If you're using Crossfire, you set it to cut. So that's all we need to do on this page for the time being. What I'm going to do now is work out what switches I'm going to use. So we have our regular inputs. So I'm just going to do it on the mix. The first thing I'm going to add is an ARM switch. So we just click it, choose the source, and that's it, done. I'm not actually going to do anything clever in this. I'm going to be using the iNav Lua script, so that will give me stuff like modes and all that. But the arming, there's safety features inside iNav itself, so I'm not going to put anything on here. But also there's going to be a point where we're disarmed and we still want to use the throttle, that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to leave this as is. And I've also put it on a separate channel so I can be disarmed but still change modes in configurator. Right, so the next thing we need to set up is our mode switch. So if you remember, I want to use this. Sorry, I've got it so zoomed in you can't see. But I want to use this switch up here. So when it's down, it's manual. When it's up, it's return to home. When it's in the middle, it can use the 6-way switch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to inputs, and I'm going to create a new input, and I'm going to call this modes or mode, whatever it will fit. So this one is going to be our standard modes, and that's using the 6-position switch. But what I need to do is change the weight of this down to probably 80% will be fine. And what we're going to do is set the switch up so SA is in the middle. what we're going to do is add another switch in. So we edit this. This will be our emergency modes. I don't know. All right, so these are our extra modes. We want that on SA, and we want to do, so we need to set this to not SA, and we want to put the weight back to 100. So what we're going to have now on our input is when we're in manual, you can see the dot is all the way to the top. When this switch is in the middle position, the 6-way switch works, and when it's in the up position you can see the dot at the bottom. So we've got return to home, 6 modes, and manual. So all we need to do now is create a mix. On channel 6, we're going to call this one modes, and we're going to use our mode input. And that's all we need to do. So you can see at the moment we're on 80, 48, 16, 100, minus 100. So that is our modes. So that's all on one channel, and we have 8 flight modes. So now we've got our modes. The next thing I'm going to do is add the additional modes in. So what I'm going to do is create an additional let's call it additional functions. So the first one I'm going to do is use switch SG, which I want to use for my auto trim and auto tune. So at the moment what I have is towards me is 100%, middle is 0, and away from me is minus 100. The problem with this is I want to use the middle position as my off position, and we also want to shift it up slightly. So what I'm going to do is come out of this, and I'm going to create a curve. So I'm going to call this TUN for tune. It just needs to be a standard 3-point curve. And the way I'm going to set it up is this is going to be at 50, the middle position at 0, and the end position at 100. So if I come back out, go back into the mix, and we'll edit our add effects, what you can now see is on here in the middle position is 0 because we haven't added the curve yet. So now if I go in here, add a custom curve, and we want to use our TUN curve. So now away from me is 50, middle position is 0, towards me is 100. So that is taking care of the top half of the switch. So now what we need to do is add in our other switch. So this here is going to be our launch. So we'll set this up on switch SD, which is what we want, but you can see it's going at 100 to minus 100. And because I want to use towards me as another function, middle position I want auto launch, and away from me I want off, what I need to do is create another curve for this. So we'll exit out, and we'll create a launch, again 3-point. And what we want to do, it was actually reversed. So away from me, or towards me, sorry, needs to be at minus 100. So we may need to modify this. We want that minus, actually no, it's going to be the opposite, isn't it? So this here needs to be minus 100. This needs to be 0. We can try it. If it's backwards, we can reverse it. So now what we'll do is go back to our mix, edit, and then we're going to add our custom curve launch. So away from me is 0, middle is -50, towards me -100. But what you'll see here is if I'll have both switches in the off position is fine, it's at 0. If I lower the launch, it's fine. But if I leave it at the bottom and then move the other switch, you'll notice that it's at the bottom half. So that will really confuse iNav. So what we need to do now is make sure that they only operate when the other switch is off. So because this is the launch switch, I'm going to add in a switch here so that it will only work when SG is in the middle position. And likewise on this one, I'm going to put a switch so that it will only work when SD is in the up position. So if I exit out, now we can see both switches are in the off position. If I put it in auto launch, auto launch and auto tune are both plus -150. If I move the other switch, it just turns it off. So put the auto launch or put the tuning switch in the off position, and then the auto launch switch will work. If I move the tuning switch, it just goes in the off position. So it always defaults to off, which is the safest thing to do. So now we have those two functions on a single radio channel. We don't need to mess about. So we've done all this so far with absolutely zero logic whatsoever. This is all just using a mix. So the next step is to add our OSDs. Now I'm going to use this potentiometer right here, and I'm also going to set it up so that the last position we can use these to do our adjustments in iNav. So again, we're going to go back to the inputs page. I do have a video for this already, but I'm just going to go through it briefly here. So I'm going to call it OSD, and I'm going to set the source to S1, which you can see is completely linear. Hi guys, I realised that section was actually going to take way too long, so what I'm going to do is just stick a link up in this corner for my tutorial on how to change the trim tabs to do the adjustments in iNav. What I'll go over briefly is the setup and show the additional parts that I've added, so that if I'm in an adjustment mode, so we're in the tuning and we've clicked up once, so we're doing an adjustment change, you can't actually do auto trim or auto tune, so we get a message.
Auto tuning cannot be used in the manual tuning mode,
etc.
Manual tuning off, manual tuning.
Right, so what I'll show you is briefly what we've done. So we have a tuning mode which is set up to the logical switch, that's in the tutorial video. We have our OSD input, which is basically just get it in. So this pot here is the OSD input, and it's set to 6%. We also have our adjustment parameter, global variable, which again, they're both in the tutorial. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. So mix, again, we have on channel 8 our OSD, on channel 9 our adjustment parameter, and on channel 10 our adjustment value. So again, those three are all in the tutorial. So the things that I've done different on this setup, you'll notice that on SG we originally had a switch so that it would not be active if the auto launch switch was on. That had to be in the off position. So what I've done is I've added a logical switch because we actually need to test two things. So I'll explain that shortly. So that's one change, but we'll get to it. So output's nothing. We have our adjustment parameter variable, which is again in the tutorial. Right, so our logical switches. So the first few from 57 down to 60 are all in that tutorial. They'll probably be in a different position on the tutorial, but they are the 4 logical switches in the tutorial. So the second one, 58, detects that the pot is in the manual tuning position. 57 is basically checking to see that we're in the manual tuning mode and that we're actually changing something. So the global variable isn't -100. So that means that we're changing something. And 59 and 60 are just saying that we're in the manual tuning mode and the rudder left and rudder right trims have been clicked respectively. So next, what we're checking is the stuff for disabling the auto trim and auto tune if we're doing an adjustment. You can still use auto trim and auto tune in the manual tuning OSD because it'd be useful to see PIDs and stuff, and there's no point duplicating that elsewhere. All you need to do is just click it all the way down until you're not adjusting anything, and then it will work. So the first one, what we're doing is we're checking our auto trim auto tune switch to make sure that it is in a position where we are doing some tuning. So what I'm checking is my center position is off, so I'm just checking here that it's either side of center. And what we're also checking is that we're not actually at -100 or above -100. So if this switch here, the not switch is active, we can actually trim and tune.
Auto tune.
So you can see what we're doing now. We're checking auto trim and auto tune, and also we're not actually doing an adjustment. So as soon as we click up and do an adjustment, you'll see 57 is activated. So now this bottom switch here, 64, will activate and give us a warning message.
Auto tuning cannot be used in the manual tuning mode. Auto tuning cannot be used in the manual tuning mode.
And the message is the same either way, just says auto tuning. So there's otherwise, you need another sound file and another logical switch. It gives the message clear enough. So that's what those 4 are for. And the top one, number 56, is checking that we can actually use the switch in general. So we need 57 to not be active, so we need to be either
manual tuning off,
not in the manual tuning OSD,
manual tuning,
or in the manual tuning OSD, but without actually being able to adjust the parameter. So that's the first one. And the second one is making sure that SD is in that off position. So that is now what we use in the mixer to decide whether we can use or output the auto trim, auto tune switches. So the only other differences are sorry, I've gone backwards again, in the special functions. So again, some of these are going to be the same. So the override is, so this is a standard in the tutorial. So when we're out of the tuning mode,
manual tuning off,
it will set the global variable to -100 to make sure everything is disabled until we actually want to use it. 57 is when we get this potentiometer into the manual tuning position, it forces the channel to 100 so that we have a definitive place in iNav. So there's no gray area where we may be in auto or in non-tuning here, but iNav thinks it's tuning. So there's no gray area. So that's what that one's for. We have the throttle up and down trims to adjust the global variable. So that's all the standard stuff. And then the bottom 4 are just feedback. So we have, I believe it's these two here. So it's going to tell us so 58 is, special function 63 is saying that we're in the manual tuning mode. 64 being the
manual tuning off,
normal flying,
manual tuning.
And the 3 above will be
Auto tune.
So we have auto tune, auto trim, and 62 will be you can't do it.
Auto tuning cannot be used in the manual tuning mode.
So those three functions there are just for the auto trim, auto tune feedback. So that's all the differences to the tutorial. So what we'll do is we'll head back and carry on setting up our model. So let's take stock of what we've got. We've got our basic controls. We have an arm switch. We have our 8-position mode switch. We have auto trim, auto tune, auto launch, plus one other feature on channel 7. On channel 8, we have our OSD. And on channel 9, we have our adjustment parameters. And on channel 10, we have our adjustment values. I thought I was done, but I'm going to add one more thing. So I did mention at the beginning I'll be covering the momentary switch options. However, I'm going to do a completely separate video on that because it can be applied to anything. So, but to give a brief overview of what it will do is I'll hold the switch in and the radio will tell me a function that it can do. So this could be enter the OSD menu, load a waypoint mission, calibrate the compass, any of the iNav stick settings we can actually just put into here, let go, and it will perform the commands for us. So that will be covered in a separate video. But what I'm also going to add is a way to change the VTX power in flight. So on this transmitter, I'm actually going to use this extra trim tab right here, which doesn't appear to be used for anything. So it's just an extra switch. So I need to find out where we can disable this. And then what we're going to do is add it. So that any time that we're not in the manual tuning mode, this will be active here. And the way I'm going to do it is actually combine it on the radio channel for this trim, so that when we're not in the manual tuning mode, it passes this trim switch over. When we are in manual tuning, it uses this one here. I decided it would be better to keep them separate, so that's why I'm using this and not this, but also it allows this one to still be active to manually trim the yaw if you have a model that requires it. So we don't really want to be using this to change parameters. Obviously, if you're using a wing, you can just enable it the whole time, and then we'll just use the position of this switch here to choose what we're editing in the iNav screen. So let's get on with it. So we go in the model menu first, and we'll head over to the flight modes page. And what we need to do is, this is the default flight mode. So we have all these trims, then we have trims 5 and 6. So I'm guessing this is trim 5 and this is trim 6. So what I'm going to do is just disable it, and it's now disabled. So now we've disabled our trim, what we need to do is create a couple more logical switches to enable the actual use of the trim. So what we're going to do is head over to logical switches, and what you'll remember is we had number 59, number 60. What we actually just want is copies of these, but changed slightly. So what I'm going to do is copy it, and I'm going to go up to number 54 and paste it in. And what we need to do is we need to invert this here. So long hold after it's selected, invert, and then we need to change this to trim 5. So trim 5 up, and then what we can do is just copy this one, paste it in here, and change this to trim 5 down. So you can see we're out of manual tuning. When we go up, it activates. When we go down, it activates. Put it in manual tuning, and it won't do anything. So now what we can do is go back to our mix page. So hold down the page button and it goes backwards. And then what we're going to do is find our values page, and we're going to copy this. So you can do it this way. This is the long way of doing it. So we're going to paste it in there, and we'll edit this. And all we need to do is change this to logical switch 54. So take it out of manual tuning, and that works. And then what we need to do to copy this one with the negative weight. So I'm just doing a quick way this time. So just click it and go down, and then we can edit this. And we're going to change the switch to 55. So there we go. So now what you can see on our input channel 10, when we're out of the manual tuning mode, this one here works. As soon as we go into manual tuning, this won't work, but this one will. So we're just always going to be using channel 10 for our tuning, and we're also just going to be using channel 9 to set that in iNav. I think I'm pretty much there. I've got two. If I'm using a 12 channel system, I have 2 channels left, which I could use for pan and tilt, or I have got LEDs on some models, so I'm going to probably add my LED switch. But that means that I could have LEDs plus a pan on a standard 12 channel system. If I'm using, so that's Crossfire L9R. If I'm using R9, I can use my full 16 channels, no problem. So that's everything now set up on the radio. So what we'll do now is head over to iNav and set everything up on there. Okay, so now we get to the point where we need to implement what we've done on the transmitter in iNav. So we'll connect up, and what we're going to do is first of all going to go to the receiver tab. And on the receiver page, what we need to do is sort out our endpoints, because obviously this is a new model and the endpoints are going to be incorrect. So we need to do this like normal on the roll, pitch and throttle channels, but we also need to do it on our channel 9, which is our adjustment parameter channel. So to do that, what we first need to do is actually alter the adjustment parameter variable. So we'll go into the model menu, and then we're going to page through until we get to our global functions. Now, if you remember, we set this global variables. We set this global variable up to limit the amount of adjustments we've got based on how many we're going to use. But to set it up in iNav to get the endpoints, we need to put this up to 100. Now we can go ahead and set the endpoints. So we're going to come back out of the global variables. And now what we're going to do is go back to the outputs page. And we need to adjust these endpoints. So what you'll probably find is once you've done one, they're all going to be the same. So what we'll do is we'll head over to iNav as well, and I'll show you what we're going to do. So what we're looking at is this value here. And what I'll do is I'll set up on the aileron. So when I push the aileron stick to the right, this value needs to be 2000. So what we need to do is adjust the upper value here and bring it down until the value in iNav reads 2000, which is about 97.7 on this transmitter. So we're going to go 97.7, and I'd hazard to bet that if we go minus 97.7 with the low end point, it will be right. So I've just set that. Now I'm going to move the stick over to the left, and yes, it's at 1000. And we want the center to be 1500. Now we just need to repeat that for the other channels. So elevator, so check it. So down should be 1000. So that's actually different. It's 1003. There we go. And up should be 2000. But we notice the center point is actually different. So what we can do is adjust the center midpoint here. So that's at 1500. So down, we just have to tweak it until it's right. There we go, it's 1000. Okay. So elevator, throttle, again down, needs to be 1000. and all the way up needs to be 2000. With the throttle, you don't need to worry about the midpoint, because where it's not a sprung control, chances of you getting it dead in the center anyway is near on impossible. So I wouldn't worry too much about the midpoint on the throttle. With the rudder, if you notice the center, it was actually glitching about a bit there. So I'm going to drop it down just 1 microsecond and see if that helps. And then all the way to the left, we need 1000. And all the way to the right, we need 2000. That center point is still a little bit... There we go. So if you notice, I'll come back into the transmitter. You notice that not everything is perfect on this. So I've moved some center points, and the ones where I've moved the center points, actually this one's fine, but this one where I've moved the center points, the endpoints are slightly different. But don't worry, just get this right so that on the chart here, it's all the way to the left or all the way down is 1000, all the way to the right or all the way up is 2000. Oh, so the pitch is wrong on the... Let's double check the pitch. There we go. So yeah, all the way up or right is 2000, all the way down or left is 1000, and center should be 1500. And that needs to be correct on both sticks. As I say, apart from the throttle, you can ignore the center point for the throttle. So what we also need to do is change it for our adjustment parameters. So what we need to do for this is we need to bring this round to enable our manual tuning OSD. And now we can set the channel 9 adjustment parameter steps. So what we do, but as we're starting off, we're all the way down, it's at -100 on the output. So what we need to do is just get channel 9 to 2000. Again, we don't need to worry about midpoints on this. And now what we need to do is just bump up our adjustment all the way to the top. So it'll be all 20 steps. And now we need to bring this down to 2000. So that is now set perfectly. We can adjust everything in the adjustments tab with no problem. And you can see when I turn it off, it goes down. You can see channel 8 is the OSD. We don't need to worry about that. And we can also check channel 10 is working. So we'll knock that up 1. And that's going up and down. Again, we don't need to worry about the endpoints on that. It was literally just the adjustment parameter, where it's quite a fine increment. We want that to be spot on. So there we go. We can turn our manual tuning off for the minute. So that's it done on the transmitter, with the exception of our adjustment global variable. We can put that back to however many steps we want. So if I'm going for 12, we want to set this back to 20. So that's it, all done on the transmitter. So now if we head over to the modes page, what we first need to set up is our arming switch. So the way I have mine set up is away from me is armed and towards me is disarmed, which happens to be the default for iNav. If you've noticed a video I put out recently about a bug or a glitch with FreeSky, so if you're on the edge of failsafe and you rapidly failsafe and recover quickly quite a few times, it can cause a glitch which actually forces the channels or certain channels low. And one of those channels could be the arming switch. If that happens, it will disarm when it comes back from the failsafe. To get around that, you just need to have the arming position right here. So this blue box, if it's between 900 and 1000, then you'll be safe. Even if a glitch happens, it won't disarm. You still might have peculiarities on other channels, but you won't disarm. So putting it here will keep you flying. And in that video, I actually show you how you can have this here, but have this, your arming switch, either way around. So if you like to be armed towards yourself, you can still have it this end. And it's basically what you're doing is you're setting the arm switch up as an input rather than just using the switch. And then you just reverse the weight in the input and that will sort this out all out. So iNav will still be here and you'll be armed no matter which way around you prefer your switch. But I'll link to that video up in that corner. So okay, so the arming switch is done. So the next one I want to set up is on this switch here. If you remember, in the middle it's using this 6 position switch here. In the up position we want return to home. So what I'll do is I'll find return to home. We're going to add a range and we're on channel 6 for our modes. So return to home is actually here. So if that glitches, it's going to put it in return to home, which is no bad thing. So while we're here, we may as well add manual, which is at this end. Wherever manual is. I wish they'd sort this order out. It's not very intuitive. Or make it so you can drag it and change the order. Right, so there we go. We have manual. And also, I know we're not connected, we can't actually fly, but it would be nice if the indicator changed color to show which modes were active, even if we can't physically use them at that time. Maybe have it blue for, you know, we can use it, it's active, or have it, I don't know, green for it will work when all the conditions are met. Because at the moment, we're putting it here, other than seeing it's inside that bar, we don't actually have any feedback. So that's another one for the devs. I'll probably put something in GitHub for that. But anyway, we'll put this switch back in the middle, and now we can see that we are using this 6 position switch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave, what we can then do is set these up to 1025 intervals. So I'm going to leave this blank. That'll be for acro mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick in angle purely for testing, because I don't really fly with angle. So that sort of size spacer I think will be fine. Yep. So the next mode, what should we have? 3D cruise maybe? We want nav cruise. So nav cruise, but I want 3D cruise, so we're going to add alt hold to that. Next position, let's do position hold. So set that there. And now I still have 2 positions left, which, to be honest, I've only used 6 flight modes, so I don't really know what I'm going to put on them. So it would be silly to leave it as acro. So what I might do is the end one, I might set up for waypoint missions. So that's clear and manual, isn't it? Yeah. So that leaves this one extra flight mode that at the moment I'm not going to use. So I'm just going to extend position hold out. So it's basically, it won't, if I accidentally go to it, it's not going to kill anything. So there we go. That's the modes done. You can choose whichever 8 modes that you want. So the next one we're going to set up is the tuning. So we need to be in a standard OSD or in the manual tuning OSD, but without the tuning parameter selected. So what we need is additional functions are on channel 7. So let's find out which way around it is. Right, so away is auto tune. So channel 7, auto tune. Channel 7, auto trim. That's quite a nice big block here. So we also have launch mode on channel 7. And if you notice that center point here, I'm always going to leave blank because that is our off position. Potentially you could have it for something else, but you can't actually turn it off, so there's not really much point. Just leave it so that in that middle, so that this in the middle and this up is nothing. And the last one that I have in this position is home reset. Again, this is just my personal setup. Whatever you choose to put in there is completely up to you. So that's our additional function all working. So what else do we have? The next one we have is our OSD. So what I'm going to have is in the first position, I'm going to actually have OSD off. So that is channel 8. So OSD off. And now we have our alternates. So we need a bit of a gap for normal OSD. So what we need to do is just divide this into 5 really. So it's going to be about 200. That's going to be there. And that will be to there. So we have our first fifth is OSD off. Our second fifth is the default OSD. Next third fifth, Alt 1. Fourth fifth is Alt 2. And our fifth fifth. So that's interesting. What we should be doing is outputting 100% as soon as we switch into that. But what we should do is as soon as it's in manual tuning mode, it should pin it straight to this end. So there's something not quite right in here. So how can I get the screen looking better for you guys? There we go. I'll just hold it there for a second and we'll get this nice and big. Right, so if we hold our model button, we're going to go back and we're going to have a look at the global variables first. So what we need is this switch here. As soon as we go into manual tuning, logical switch 58 activates. So what we need is a special function on logical switch 58. That's why it's been put on 57. It must have just been knocked. So we put that on 58 and now it will pin it to the top. So we can go back, get that so you can see the switches. So now what will happen, you see it's pinned to the very top there. And then when I come out of manual tuning, it's down here. So don't worry about it being slightly out, because it'll be fine. We could actually put this one right up here, because as soon as we get in manual tuning, it will jump to the right position. So there we go. The OSD is now correct. So that's our OSDs. Right, so that is everything in our modes page done. Now what we need to do is head over to adjustments. So don't forget to save it. And then in adjustments, what we're going to do is put this in manual tuning mode first of all. And we can enable our adjustment, set this up to channel 9, which is our adjustment parameters. And then what we need to do is set the position. So obviously where it is at the moment is our off position. And when we click up, we want it in a on position. So 1025 to 1075 will be on. And then we can do this with all the adjustments that we're going to use. So I've got 12 positions. I can set up all 12. There will be a version soon with 20. So knock yourselves out. But this all needs to be on channel 9. And then what we're going to do is just stagger these. So you can see it's quite a close activation point. But if you just put the center markers either side, then it's fine. Again, it would be nice to have an indicator to know when they're working. So that's our 12 modes done. And you can see if I keep clicking this, it's not going to move any further. But if we change the adjustment variable to 100, it will keep going for the other 8 missing adjustment parameters when it's implemented. So next what we need to do is choose what we want to adjust. So let's just set this up for pitch P, and this needs to be on channel 10, pitch I, pitch D. So you notice at the moment also that this is a fixed wing, but it is saying D. At the moment it doesn't adjust feed forward, but that is also something that's coming. So what we can also change, you can set this up however you want. So what I'm going to do is, there's one for board alignment. So there's board roll alignment and board pitch alignment. So we can trim our flight controller adjustment so we can get the flying nice and level. Let's see, what else can we put on? We can do all sorts of tuning stuff. So we've got the pitch to throttle for cruising and navigation. You can do all that sort of adjustments. I mean, there's lots on here to play with. This is again up to you. I'm actually going to just save this as is, just so we can carry on with the tutorial. You've seen how it works. I have another video on setting this up separately, so I won't cover too much ground, but if I come down, you probably won't see it on anything here, but channel 10 is actually going to change this. So the only other thing that I'm going to show you how to do now is set up your OSD, basically just to get this data in. So what we're going to do is make sure that's saved. See, what I'll do is I'll turn these four off for the minute. It will remember all this stuff, so don't worry. And what we should really do is minus whatever it is from the adjustment variable on there. But what we're going to do is, for OSD, you can set up default layout 1 and 2, and alternative layout 1 and 2 however you want. I would actually recommend on default having your GPS coordinates somewhere, and there's a variable in iNav where you can set it so if your flight controller failsafes, it automatically goes to this default OSD. So at least if you're in a failsafe, you will have your GPS coordinates, which may help you find a model. You can set it up obviously to come back to your transmitter via telemetry, but if there's any issues with that, at least you also have it in OSD as a backup. So I would recommend that. I'll dig out the parameter and I'll stick it in the description. But alternate layout number 3 is where you'll be doing your tuning. So you can still have other parameters here like your RSSI, battery, all that stuff. But what you need to do is, if you scroll down to adjustments, what you need to do is put on here the settings that you've actually set in your adjustments. So we had pitch first, then roll. Oh yeah, board alignment, pitch and roll. So yeah, whatever you put in that adjustments page here, just put the equivalent on this display here. Basically what will happen is in the adjustments video, you'll actually see it. I hooked my OSD up to the computer and you can see it go through as I change things. But what it will do is when you click through with that, it will highlight the parameter you're adjusting, and then you use the yaw trim to adjust the value up and down. So we're back in the adjustments page, and if you remember, I added an extra feature to use this trim here to control the VTX power when we're not manually tuning the plane. So what we're going to use, if I enable these bottom two here, we're going to use channel 9, which, if you remember, is our adjustment here. So if we're in the manual tuning mode, it goes up, but as soon as we exit out, it turns off. So all we need to do is set our range into the off position here. Actually, we probably only need one, actually. Let's get rid of that one. And what we're going to do is just find the VTX power. VTX power level adjustment. and we're going to use channel 10, which, if you remember, manual tuning, we're using this for channel 10, but because we're well, we're in the off position, so it should work now. But if we click this up, it won't actually work. As soon as we come out of manual tuning, we're using this trim here to adjust the VTX power. So that's how we're going to add that. Remove the save. Okay, so I thought I'd show you how the OSD stuff works along with the manual tuning. Unfortunately, I can't show the transmitter at the same time as the OSD, but I can tell you what I'm doing. So what I've got so far, this is the OSD selector all the way to the left, so it's OSD off. As I move it to the right, you'll see we enable the default OSD, and what you can see on screen is the power level next to channel flashing. Now the reason it's flashing is because we can change it. So if I had a VTX with smart audio hooked up, I would be able to change the power level using the trim tab number 5. So unfortunately there's no VTX hooked up, so we can't actually demonstrate that. But you can see by it flashing that it's ready to take an input. So what we can do is, as we continue on, that's alternate OSD 1. Then we go to alternate OSD 2. Again, the flashing 0 is the VTX power. And then what we do is go into the manual tuning OSD. And at the moment you can see nothing is flashing because we haven't actually set our adjustment parameter. But if I click up on the throttle trim, you'll see that the pitch parameter is now flashing. And if I go right on the yaw trim, you can see the value increasing. Again, up on the throttle, and we can choose which value we want. So we have roll, using the yaw trim to change it. Again, this at the moment on a plane is feed forward, and in the current iNav, which is 2.5.2, I believe the firmware is, then this won't actually work. But there is a fix that should be released with one of the newer versions. At the very latest, it will be in 2.6.0. So there we go, and we have our board alignment roll and our board alignment pitch. So if we can go all the way back down again, you'll see the LEDs or the OSD stops flashing. Or if I go up to one that's selected, what I'm going to do now is turn the pot for the OSD back out of manual tuning. If I go back into manual tuning, you'll see nothing is flashing, even though I've not touched the trim tabs. That's because we reset everything as soon as we exit the OSD. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it there, guys, because to be honest, most of the rest of this was really about just getting your transmitter set up with iNav. And we've just thrown in a few extra features and a few different options. So what I do is I leave it here because setting the rest up is really something that should be covered elsewhere. But this will at least be able to get you to cook your transmitter up. Hopefully I've given you plenty of different options so you can basically lay it out as you like. But I've given you different options for different switch configurations using actually no logic with this one. So anyway, I hope you guys find this video useful. If you do, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing, which is obviously, don't click that one, click the one down there somewhere. That would be really great. It would help my channel, and obviously the likes and subscribes will hopefully get this video out to more people so they can learn about setting their transmitters up with iNav 2, which at the end of the day, that's why I'm doing this, is to help people out. So thank you very much, guys. Fly your models like you stole them, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.